David sat in the corner booth of the coffee shop, typing away on his laptop. The place was almost empty at 9 in the evening, which was exactly why he liked coming here. After his divorce 6 months ago, he found peace in quiet spaces where nobody bothered him. The soft jazz music and the smell of fresh coffee beans helped him focus on his work. He was debugging some code when a woman approached his table. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back neatly, wearing a simple black coat. What struck him most were her eyes. They seemed to look right through him, studying everything about his face. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear, but somehow formal. "Are you David? I believe we matched on that dating app a few weeks ago." David looked up, confused. He hadn't been on any dating apps recently. Actually, he had deleted them all after his divorce. But the woman seemed so certain, and honestly, he was lonely enough to not mind the company. "I think you might have me confused with someone else," he said, closing his laptop halfway. "But you're welcome to sit if you want." She slid into the seat across from him without hesitation. "Perhaps I was mistaken, but meeting you now feels destined." She tilted her head slightly, like she was examining a puzzle piece. "You have an interesting face, very expressive. I imagine you feel emotions quite deeply." That was an odd thing to say to someone you just met. David shifted in his seat. "I guess so." "Don't most people?" "Not in the same way," she replied. "Some people form attachments easily, others build walls. You seem like someone who remembers every person who ever mattered to you." David felt a chill run down his spine. How could she know that? He was the type who kept old photos, who still had his ex-wife's number saved in his phone even though they barely spoke. He collected memories like some people collected stamps. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to change the subject. "Elena." She said, "I work in research. I study human behavior, specifically how people form connections with each other." She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, David, what makes someone important to you? What creates that bond between two people?" The question felt heavy, like there was more behind it than casual conversation. David found himself actually thinking about it instead of giving a polite, surface-level answer. "I don't know," he said slowly. "Time, I guess, shared experiences. Going through difficult things together." He paused. "My ex-wife and I, we were together for 8 years. Even though it ended badly, there's still this connection. Like we're tied together somehow, even when we don't want to be." Elena's eyes lit up with what looked like genuine fascination. "Yes, exactly. These invisible threads between people. In my culture, we believe these connections are more real than most humans understand. They're not just emotions. They're actual bonds that can be strengthened." "Your culture?" David asked. "Where are you from?" Elena smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Somewhere far from here. My people have different traditions around relationships and commitment." She reached into her coat pocket. "For instance, we have ceremonies that create permanent bonds between two people, unbreakable ones." She pulled out a ring unlike anything David had ever seen. It looked like metal, but it seemed to shift slightly in the light, showing patterns. That didn't quite make sense. The surface had tiny geometric designs carved into it, almost like a circuit board but more organic. "This belonged to my grandmother," Elena said, holding it up to the light. "She gave it to me before she passed away. She told me that when you find someone whose soul matches yours, you give them this ring." David stared at it. The patterns seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. "It's beautiful, but I don't think we know each other well enough for, in my culture. We don't wait for time to create bonds," Elena interrupted. "We believe in instant recognition. When you meet someone whose energy matches yours, you know immediately." She reached across the table and took his left hand in hers. Her skin felt unusually warm. "I knew the moment I saw you." Before David could pull his hand away, she slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly, which was strange because his fingers were pretty thick. As soon as it touched his skin, he felt a warm tingling sensation shoot up his arm. "With this ring, I bind you to me," Elena said, her voice taking on an almost ceremonial tone. "And I bind myself to you. May nothing separate what we have joined." Tonight, David tried to pull the ring off immediately, but it wouldn't budge. It wasn't stuck in the normal way. It felt like it had somehow molded itself to his finger. The warm tingling spread through his whole hand. "Hey, what did you do?" he said, panic rising in his voice. "I can't get this off." But when he looked up, Elena was already standing. "Give it time," she said calmly. "These things need to settle. You'll understand soon." "Wait," David called out, struggling to remove the ring with his other hand. "You can't just put jewelry on strangers and walk away." Elena paused at the edge of his table. "We're not strangers anymore, David. We're connected now. You'll start to feel it soon, this pull toward me. Don't fight it. It's natural." She walked toward the exit, leaving David sitting there with his heart racing. The ring felt warm against his skin, and for some reason, watching her leave made him feel anxious in a way he couldn't explain. Like part of him was walking out that door with her. He spent the next 20 minutes trying everything to get the ring off. Soap from the bathroom, ice from his water glass, even butter from the pastry case when the barista wasn't looking. Nothing worked. The ring seemed to have fused with his finger. By the time he gave up and headed home, David noticed something strange every few steps. He found himself looking back toward the coffee shop, as if Elena might return. He told himself it was just because he was angry about the ring, but deep down, he knew it was something else. He wanted to see her again, and that terrified him more than being stuck with mysterious jewelry from a complete stranger. David woke up the next morning with Elena on his mind, not in a romantic way, but like a song stuck in his head that he couldn't shake. He looked down at his hand, hoping the whole thing had been some weird dream. The ring was still there, gleaming, and the morning sunlight streaming through his bedroom window. He tried again to pull it off, using soap and lotion from his bathroom. The ring wouldn't move even a millimeter. It felt like it had grown into his skin overnight. Frustrated, he grabbed his keys and headed to the jewelry store downtown. The old man behind the counter examined the ring through his magnifying glass for several minutes, his eyebrows getting higher and higher. "I've never seen anything like this," he admitted. "What kind of metal is this? It's not gold, silver, or platinum. And these patterns," he shook his head. "Where did you get this?" "Someone put it on me," David said, feeling foolish. "I need it cut off." The jeweler looked at him strangely, but brought out his ring cutter. The moment the tool touched the ring, David felt a sharp pain shoot through his entire body. Not just his hand, everywhere. He jerked his hand away, gasping. "Are you okay?" the jeweler asked. Concerned, David's heart was racing, and he felt nauseous. "I'm fine. Maybe we should try a different approach." But every tool the jeweler tried had the same effect. The moment anything touched the ring, David felt sick and panicky, like something terrible was about to happen. After 20 minutes, he gave up and left the shop, the jeweler staring after him in confusion. Walking back to his car, David noticed something odd. A woman across the street looked exactly like Eleanor from behind, same height, same dark hair. Without thinking, he crossed the street to get a better look. When the woman turned around, it wasn't Eleanor at all, just a stranger who looked nothing like her up close. This happened 3 more times on his way home. Every time he saw a woman with dark hair, his heart would speed up and he'd find himself following her for a block or 2 before realizing his mistake. It was like his brain was playing tricks on him. That night, David had the most vivid dream of his life. He was back in the coffee shop, but this time Eleanor was sitting across from him in complete silence. She wasn't saying anything, just watching him with those intense eyes. In the dream, he felt completely calm and happy, like everything in the world was exactly as it should be. He woke up feeling refreshed but also confused. Why was he dreaming about a stranger who had basically assaulted him with jewelry at work? The next day, David couldn't concentrate. He kept checking his phone, hoping for what? He wasn't sure. Round noon, he got a text from an unknown number, 42nd and Oak, 3 p.m. David stared at the message. He didn't recognize the number, but somehow, he knew it was from Eleanor. The smart thing would be to ignore it, maybe even block the number. Instead, He found himself looking up the address and calculating how long it would take to get there. At 2:45, David was standing on the corner of 42nd and Oak, feeling like an idiot. Why was he here? He barely knew this woman. She had forced jewelry on him and disappeared. Any reasonable person would have called the police by now. At exactly 3 p.m., Elena appeared. She seemed to materialize out of the crowd, wearing the same black coat from the night before. She approached him like she had been expecting him to be there. "How are you feeling?" she asked, as if they were continuing a conversation from earlier, confused. David admitted, and a little angry. "What did you do to me?" "The ring is adjusting to you," Elena said matter-of-factly. "It takes time for the connection to fully form. Are you sleeping well? Dreaming?" David's mouth fell open. "How did you know about the dreams?" "It's part of the process," she said, pulling out a small device that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a medical scanner. "May I check your vitals?" "My what?" "No." David stepped back. "What is that thing?" Elena looked disappointed, but put the device away. "You're fighting the connection. That will only make things more difficult." "What connection?" "You put a ring on me without permission. That's not a connection. That's assault. In your culture, perhaps," Elena said. "But where I come from, we understand that some bonds transcend individual choice. They're bigger than what one person wants in a single moment." David felt that sick, panicky feeling again. "Take it off, right now." "I can't," Elena said simply. "Only you can remove it, and only when you're ready to accept what it means." "That makes no sense," David said. But even as he spoke, he realized he wasn't walking away. Something was keeping him there, listening to her crazy explanations. "Meet me tomorrow," Elena said, already turning to leave. "Same time. I'll explain everything then." "I'm not coming," David called after her. "This is insane." But Elena was already disappearing into the crowd, and David knew he was lying. He would be here tomorrow. He had to be here tomorrow. The thought of not seeing her again made his chest feel tight with anxiety. That evening, David called his sister Lisa. She was the only family he had left, and she always gave good advice. "You sound weird," Lisa said after he had told her about meeting someone new. He hadn't mentioned the ring or the strange circumstances. "Are you eating enough? Getting sleep?" "I'm fine," David lied. I think I might be developing feelings for someone I barely know. Is that normal? After what happened with your marriage?" "I think you're just lonely," Lisa said gently. "But be careful. Don't rush into anything. Take time to really get to know someone before you get attached." If only she knew, David thought. He was already attached, and he had no idea how it had happened so fast. That night, he dreamed of Elena again. This time, she was showing him a place he had never seen before, a room filled with strange equipment and computer screens. She was explaining something important, but he couldn't understand the words. When he woke up, he felt like he had lost something vital. David spent the entire weekend researching the ring. He took hundreds of photos from every angle and uploaded them to reverse image search engines. Nothing came up. He posted the pictures on forums for jewelry collectors, metal workers, and even archaeologists. Everyone was stumped. The closest anyone came was a metal worker who said it looked like some kind of advanced alloy that hadn't been invented yet. The dreams were getting stronger. Every night, Elena would appear in his sleep, showing him glimpses of places he had never been. Sometimes it was that strange room with the equipment. Other times it was landscapes that looked almost like Earth but somehow different. The sky a slightly wrong shade of blue, the plants geometric in their growth patterns. By Monday morning, David felt like he was losing his mind. He had called in sick to work 3 days in a row, spending all his time obsessing over Elena and the ring. The worst part was how much he missed her, even though he barely knew her. It was like missing a limb he never had. He decided to follow her. The next time she texted him coordinates, instead of just showing up and talking to her, he would arrive early and watch where she came from. Maybe that would give him some answers. The text came Tuesday afternoon, Industrial District, Warehouse Row, 4 p.m. David arrived at 3:15 and hid behind a parked truck. The industrial area was mostly empty except for a few workers heading home early. He watched the street carefully, looking for any sign of Elena. She appeared at exactly 4 p.m., but not from any direction he was watching. One moment the street was empty, the next moment she was there. Like she had stepped out of thin air. David rubbed his eyes, wondering if the lack of sleep was making him see things. After their usual strange conversation, where Elena asked him detailed questions about his daily routine and family relationships, David decided to follow her. When she left, she walked 6 blocks to a large, unmarked building surrounded by a tall fence. A security guard led her through a gate marked Cascade Aerospace Research. Authorized personnel only. David waited until the guard went inside his booth, then walked up to the fence. Through the chain links, he could see Elena entering the main building. She had a key card and moved through the facility like she worked there. The next morning, David put on his best shirt and printed out some fake documents. He walked up to the security booth and told the guard he had papers to deliver to Dr. Elena Vasquez in the research department. "Just leave them with me," the guard said, but David shook his head. "They're confidential. I need her signature." He tried to look official and impatient. The guard made a phone call, spoke quietly for a minute, then handed David a visitor's badge. "Building C, 3rd floor. Someone will escort you." David's heart pounded as he walked through the facility. The buildings looked normal from the outside, but inside, everything felt wrong. The hallways were too quiet, and the few people he passed moved with an odd, purposeful way that reminded him of Elena. His escort, a young woman in a lab coat, led him through a maze of corridors to an elevator. They rode up in silence, but David noticed she kept glancing at his left hand, at the ring. "Here's Dr. Vasquez's office," the woman said, pointing to a door at the end of the hall. "She's expecting you." David knocked and entered. Elena's office was larger than he had expected, filled with multiple computer monitors, filing cabinets, and equipment he didn't recognize. But what made his blood run cold were the photographs pinned to a bulletin board behind her. Desktop pictures of people, dozens of them, men and women of various ages, all looking directly at the camera with confused expressions. And in every single photo, the person was wearing a ring identical to his. "You're early," Elena said from behind him. David spun around. She was standing in the doorway, blocking his exit. But she didn't look surprised to see him. "What is this place?" he asked, gesturing at the photos. "Who are these people?" Elena closed the door behind her and walked to her desk. "Research subjects," she said simply. "People who have helped us understand human emotional attachment and bonding patterns." "Helped you? Did they volunteer?" David's voice was getting louder. "In a way," Elena said. Sitting down and opening one of her filing cabinets, she pulled out a thick folder and placed it on her desk. David could see his own name written on the tab, along with his photograph paper clipped to the front. "You have a file on me. We've been observing you for 3 months, Elena said, opening the folder. "You fit the profile we were looking for. Strong emotional attachments. Slow to trust but loyal once bonded, recently experienced relationship. Loss." She looked up at him. "You were perfect for the study." David felt like the room was spinning. "What study?" Elena stood up and walked to a wall covered with charts and diagrams. They showed brain scans, chemical formulas, and what looked like psychological profiles. "We're trying to understand how your species forms lasting emotional connections," she explained. "The rings contain a synthetic compound that mimics the neurochemical processes involved in human pair bonding. It allows us to create and study these connections in a controlled environment." "Your species?" David whispered. Elena turned to look at him, and for the first time since he had met her, she smiled with what seemed like genuine warmth. "I suppose there's no point in pretending anymore," she said. "My colleagues and I are not from Earth, David. We're here to study humanity before our cultures make official contact. Understanding your emotional structures is crucial for successful integration." David sank into a chair. "You're telling me you're an alien?" "That's a crude term, but essentially correct." Elena sat across from him. "The rings allow us to experience human emotional bonding firsthand. It's the only way we can truly understand how your species functions in relationships. In the other people in the photos, Elena's expression grew somber. Previous subjects. The research has been challenging. Human emotions are more complex than we initially understood. Where are they now? Elena didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was quieter than usual. The bonding process doesn't always go smoothly. Some subjects couldn't handle the artificial attachment when we tried to reverse it. Others became too dependent on their researcher to function normally. David felt sick. What happened to them? They're safe, Elena said quickly. But they can never return to their normal lives. The neurological changes are permanent. David jumped up from his chair. You're telling me I'm stuck like this forever? Not necessarily, Elena said. Your case is different. The bond has been stronger than expected. More reciprocal. What does that mean? Elena looked uncomfortable for the first time since he had known her. It means the ring has affected me as well. I wasn't supposed to develop genuine emotional attachment to you, but I have. The technology works both ways when the connection is strong enough. David stared at her. So you're trapped too. In a sense, yes. Elena stood up and walked to the window. My superiors want to terminate the experiment, with you and with me. Terminate? The project has become compromised. They want to end all current research and start over with new subjects. Elena turned back to him. But ending the experiments has proven to be difficult for the subjects involved. David didn't need her to spell it out. The other people in the photos weren't living safely somewhere. They were gone. How long do we have? He asked quietly. Not long, Elena admitted. But I might have a solution, if you're willing to trust me. Elena led David through a back exit of the research facility to her car. A sleek black vehicle that looked ordinary on the outside, but hummed with an unusual quiet energy. As they drove into the mountains outside the city, David noticed the dashboard. Had controls he had never seen before, with symbols instead of normal buttons and displays that seemed to float in the air. Where are we going? David asked, his hand unconsciously touching the ring. It had been warm against his skin all day, almost pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. My home. Elena replied. It's the only place where we can speak freely. My colleagues monitor all communications at the facility. The drive took almost an hour, winding through forest roads that seemed to get more isolated with each mile. Finally, they turned onto a narrow dirt path that led to a house nestled deep in the woods. From the outside, it looked like a normal cabin, but David could see strange antennas and satellite dishes hidden among the trees. Inside, the house was unlike anything David had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of some kind of smooth, dark material that gave off a soft glow. Instead of normal furniture, there were curved surfaces that somehow knew to reshape themselves when he sat down. Computer screens floated in the air, without any visible support, displaying information in languages he couldn't read. This is how we really live, Elena said, watching his amazed expression. The research facility is designed to look human, but this is our actual technology. David walked around the room, afraid to touch anything. How long have you been here? On Earth? I mean, my team arrived 2 years ago, Elena said, settling onto one of the flowing chair-like shapes. But we've been observing your planet for much longer. Your species is unique in how you form emotional bonds. Most intelligent life in the galaxy is more logical, less driven by feelings. And that's why you're studying us? Elena nodded. When our people make contact with Earth officially, we need to understand how humans will react. Your emotional responses are so strong, so unpredictable. We needed to experience them ourselves to prepare for cultural exchange. She gestured to a wall that suddenly became transparent, showing a view of the forest outside. But the project has become complicated. The rings were supposed to create temporary bonds that we could study and then safely reverse. Instead, they've created something much deeper. David sat down across from her, the chair molding itself to his body. What do you mean? The other research subjects, Elena said quietly. The bonds were too strong to break cleanly. When we tried to remove their rings, some went into psychological shock. Others became so depressed they couldn't function. 3 of them, she paused, looking down at her hands. 3 of them died from the trauma of disconnection. David's blood ran cold. And you're telling me this now, because your case is different. Elena said urgently. The connection between us has gone both ways. The ring has affected me too, in ways my superiors didn't expect. I wasn't supposed to care what happened to you, but I do. Elena stood up and walked to one of the floating screens with a gesture. It displayed what looked like brain scans side by side. These are our neural patterns from last week, she said. Look at the similarities. David studied the images, even without medical training. He could see that both brains showed the same unusual activity in certain areas. What does this mean? It means the artificial bond has become real, Elena explained. For both of us. The technology was designed to make humans feel attached to us. But somehow you've made me feel attached to you as well. David felt a mix of emotions, relief that Elena cared about him, but also anger that it had all started as an experiment. So what happens now? Elena's expression grew dark. My superiors have decided the project is too dangerous to continue. They want to terminate all current subjects and start over with a different approach. Terminate, David repeated slowly. You mean they'll remove the rings by force, regardless of the psychological consequences, and then they'll erase any evidence that the experiments ever happened. David felt like he was going to be sick, including us, especially us, Elena said. I've compromised the mission by developing real feelings. They consider me a security risk now. David stood up and started pacing around the strange room. When is this supposed to happen? Soon. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe next week. They're waiting for approval from their superiors back home. Can we run? Hide somewhere? Elena shook her head. There's nowhere on Earth they couldn't find us. And even if we could hide, the ring would eventually kill you. What? The neurochemical changes aren't sustainable long-term without regular adjustment. That's why the test subjects had to keep meeting with their researchers. Without treatment, the artificial bond becomes toxic to human brain chemistry. David sank back into his chair, feeling hopeless. So I'm going to die either way. Not necessarily, Elena said, her voice taking on a tone of desperate hope. There might be another option, but it would mean giving up your human life completely. What are you talking about? Elena sat down next to him and took his hands in hers. They felt warmer than human hands should be. The ring has been slowly changing your biology to be more compatible with mine. It's why you've been having the dreams. Why you can tolerate the neural connection. Your body is adapting. Adapting to what? To become like us, Elena said softly. If the process continues, you could survive the full transformation. You would still be you. But you'd be able to live among my people. We could leave Earth together. David stared at her. You're asking me to stop being human? I'm offering you the only chance at survival I can think of, Elena replied. But there's something else you need to know. The transformation process requires one more subject. What do you mean? Elena's grip on his hands tightened. The neural bonding works best in triangular patterns. To complete your transformation safely, we need to create a connection with a third person. Someone close to you, someone whose emotional patterns are similar to yours. David's heart started racing. No, you're not talking about involving my sister. Lisa has the right psychological profile, Elena said reluctantly. She's your closest family member, and her brain chemistry would be compatible with the process. Absolutely not, David said, pulling his hands away. I won't let you experiment on her, even if it's the only way to save your life. David stood up, anger boiling over. You people have been manipulating me for months. You've made me feel things that aren't real, changed my body without my permission. And now you want to drag my sister into this nightmare? The feelings are real now, Elena said desperately. What we have, it's become genuine. I never expected to care about a human this much, but I do. I want to save you. By making me not human anymore. Elena's eyes filled with what looked like tears, though David wasn't sure if her species could actually cry. I know how it sounds. But the alternative is death for both of us. My superiors won't let either of us survive if they think we've compromised the mission. David walked to the transparent wall and looked out at the forest. Everything looked normal out there. Trees, birds, the setting sun. It was hard to believe that his entire world had been turned upside down by creatures from another planet. How long do I have to decide? He asked without turning around. Not long, Elena admitted. The longer we wait, the more dangerous the transformation becomes. And every day we delay gives my colleagues more time to find us. David closed his eyes and tried to think clearly. But the ring on his finger was warm, and he could feel Elena's presence behind him like a physical pull. Even knowing that his feelings had been artificially created, he couldn't shake the connection he felt to her. There has to be another way. He said finally, I've been searching for one, Elena said. But David, you need to understand something. Even if we found a way to reverse the ring's effects completely, I don't think I could go back to not caring about you. The bomb may have started artificially, but it's real now. David turned to face her. What are you saying? I'm saying that even if we could undo everything, I think I would choose to stay connected to you. You've changed me in ways that have nothing to do with the technology. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, David felt a moment of genuine happiness, but it was quickly followed by fear for his sister, anger at being manipulated, and the crushing weight of an impossible choice. David spent the night at Elena's house, lying on what she called a rest surface, but felt more like floating on a cloud. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by dreams that felt more like memories of places he had never been. He woke several times to find Elena sitting by the window, staring out at the forest with an expression he couldn't read. In the morning, she made him something that looked like coffee but tasted like liquid energy. We need to go back to the facility, she said. If I don't show up for work, they'll know something is wrong. What's the plan? David asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. I'm going to try to access their computer systems, Elena said. Maybe I can find another solution in their research files, or at least buy us more time. The drive back to the city was quiet. David found himself memorizing everything. The way the morning light hit the mountains, the smell of pine trees, the feeling of sitting next to Elena. If this was one of his last days as a human being, he wanted to remember what it felt like at the research facility. Elena used her keycard to get them inside through a side entrance. The hallways were busier than they had been the day before, with people in lab coats moving purposefully between rooms. Stay close to me, Elena whispered, and try to look like you belong here. They made it to her office without incident, but David could feel other workers watching them. Some of them looked human, but now that he knew what to look for, he could see the subtle differences, the too-perfect posture, the way they moved with slightly unnatural precision. Elena sat at her computer and began typing rapidly. The screen, filled with symbols and diagrams that hurt David's eyes to look at directly. I'm accessing the central research database, she explained, looking for any alternative approaches they might have considered. David wandered around the office, looking more carefully at the photos of previous test subjects. Some of them looked happy in their pictures, smiling and relaxed. Others looked confused or frightened. One photo showed a man about David's age with dark circles under his eyes and a haunted expression. Elena, David said, pointing to that photo. What happened to him specifically? Elena glanced up from her computer. That's Robert. He was one of the earliest subjects. The bomb was too intense. He became completely dependent on his researcher within days. When they tried to separate them for safety reasons, he became violent. Violent how? He threatened to hurt himself if they took the ring off. Eventually, they had to sedate him permanently. Elena's voice was matter of fact, but David could hear the underlying sadness. He's still alive, but he's not really Robert anymore. David felt sick. And you were going to do this to my sister. I was desperate, Elena admitted. I still am. But looking at these files now, I'm realizing there might be another option. What? Elena turned her computer screen toward him. The display showed what looked like a technical schematic of the ring, with various components highlighted in different colors. The rings have a fail-safe mechanism. She explained, if the bonding process becomes dangerous to the subject, they can be programmed to slowly reverse the effects over time. Why didn't you mention this before? Because I didn't know if it would work with someone who's been bonded as long as you have. And because, she hesitated, because using the failsafe would mean losing our connection completely. Not just the artificial bond, everything. David stared at the screen. You mean we wouldn't feel anything for each other anymore? The reversal process doesn't just remove the artificial feelings. Elena said quietly, it creates a psychological barrier against forming any new emotional connections with the same person. It's designed to prevent subjects from seeking out their researchers after the experiment ends. David sank into a chair. After everything they had been through, after the connection had become real for both of them, the only way to save his life was to make sure they could never care about each other again. How long would it take? He asked. Several weeks. The process has to be gradual, or it could cause the same psychological trauma as sudden removal. And you? What happens to you? Elena looked down at her hands. I would be reassigned to a different project, probably sent to another planet. My superiors would want to make sure I never had contact with humans again. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of the decision pressing down on both of them. Finally, David spoke. Is there any guarantee this failsafe would work? No. Elena admitted. It's never been tested on someone with our level of bonding. You could still suffer psychological damage, or the reversal could fail partway through. But it's better odds than the transformation or forced removal. Marginally. David stood up and walked to the window overlooking the facility's courtyard. He could see other researchers going about their work, studying humanity like specimens in a lab. The thought made him angry, but he also understood why they were doing it. Humans were probably as alien to them as they were to humans. I need to ask you something, David said without turning around. The way you feel about me now, is any of it real? Or is it all just the technology affecting your brain? Elena was quiet for so long that David thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. I don't know, she said honestly. The ring has changed both of us. But David, even if these feelings started artificially, they've shaped who I am now. The person I've become through knowing you, that's real. David turned to face her. That's not really an answer. It's the only answer I have, Eleanor replied. I know that the person I was before meeting you wouldn't have cared about your survival. She would have followed orders and moved on to the next subject. But I can't be that person anymore. David made his decision. Start the failsafe process, Elena's face fell. Are you sure? No, David said. But I won't let you turn my sister into a test subject. And I won't let them force you to watch me die. If there's a chance we can both survive this, even if it means losing each other, that's what we have to do. Elena nodded and turned back to her computer. Her fingers moved across the interface, entering commands that would begin the slow process of unraveling their connection. David watched the ring on his finger begin to dim slightly. How will I know it's working? He asked. You'll start to feel less compelled to see me, Elena explained. The dreams will fade first. Then the physical sensations, finally. The emotional attachment will weaken until it's gone completely. And then you'll be free to go back to your normal life, Elena said. You'll remember everything that happened, but it won't have any emotional weight for you anymore. It will feel like remembering a movie you watched once. David felt the ring pulse against his skin one more time, then began to cool. What about you? I'll finish my assignment here and then leave Earth, Elena said. My superiors will probably consider this whole project a failure and try a different approach to studying human emotions. Will you remember me? Elena smiled sadly. I'll remember everything, but in a few weeks. Those memories won't make me feel anything anymore. As they left the facility together for the last time, David noticed that he was already feeling less anxious about leaving Elena's side. The failsafe was working faster than expected. By the time they reached his car, the desperate need to stay close to her had faded to a manageable ache. This is goodbye, isn't it? David said. For the best, Eleanor replied, though her voice sounded strained. In a few days, you won't want to see me anymore, and I won't want to see you. David looked at her one last time, trying to memorize her face before the ring made him forget why it mattered. For what it's worth, I think what we had was real. Technology or not, Elena nodded, tears flowing freely now. I think so too. David drove home, and with each mile, the ring grew cooler and dimmer. By the time he reached his apartment, he could almost imagine a future where this entire experience would feel like someone else's story. In 6 weeks, according to Elena's calculations, it would be. But for now, while he could still feel it, David held onto the knowledge that he had been loved by someone from another world. And that love had been worth the price they both had to pay for freedom.